I would agree with you. I don't think anybody's fearless. I think fear triggers either the strongest part of you or the weakest part of you. So I think the people that succeed and go through, they do it because they just have that much strength internally that they are able to fight through fear.
And the mission exceeds the fear. If you don't have a mission, if you don't know what you're doing or why you're doing it, then it's really hard to go through fear-based, scary, challenging situations.
Right.
Why? Why would I go through this? It's easier to just keep doing what I'm doing. If there's no promised land I want to get to or no impact I want to create, then why would I suscept myself to a fear-based situation? So you don't like screamo music?
I mean, not really screamo, but there was some heavier stuff I listened to occasionally when I was younger.
Okay, as heavy as what I just played?
I wouldn't choose it. But when I was in a band, one of my buddies really loved some of the heavier stuff. But we played like System of a Down and stuff like that, but that was kind of the heaviest I did.
How about like this?
No. That's a little much. You didn't play this style of music, though.
Yeah, we had breakdowns like this.
You did?
I mean, not like crazy breakdowns. Like, this is my, let me see if I can find, like, we had, like, it definitely wasn't that intense, but we definitely had, like.
Maybe heard one harder song you did, but a lot of them were not.
Like, this is a Shake It Off cover. Taylor Swift, Shake It Off. But then we had a crazy breakdown in the middle of it.
I think I remember that part. Oh, you just went back to the other one. That's you? No. You went back to the other song.
You'll hear me scream in a second. Right here. Right, it's right here. Yeah, that's me. That was my life, dude, for years. Yeah, so I guess I am crazy. Yeah, whatever.
I miss playing music.
So you were actually in bands? I didn't know that.
Yeah, we talked about this.
Yeah, but like
I was a drummer.
I thought like you presented it in a way where the band must have been like really lame or something, because like you kind of like put your head down. Oh, I was in a band. Like,
I mean, we weren't. It wasn't after college like you were. It was like you were trying to actually go. Yeah. It was high school, but we still performed out.
Yeah, I feel like the reason that we did like edgy music was I remember when I first heard like my first screaming song, it just was like defiance. Like it just felt like a FU
when
to
was
the
that?
system.
How old were you?
Man, I probably had to be like maybe 14 or 15.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And I just remember hearing this one song. I think it was from this band called Icy Stars, who later I actually sang on stage with. There's a video of me, and actually spent a lot of time with the members of this band. They're pretty big now. I remember just hearing like, you know, the first like actual scream, and I was just like, whoa, this is like bucking the system. You know, it's so unusual. And for me, like, I always felt like an outsider because I had my dirt bike life, and then I had my life in school, and like I felt like nobody ever understood what I was doing in my dirt bike life, and like that always stuck with me. Like people knew I was the dirt bike dude, but like they didn't know to the level that like how I was doing it. And that always just sucked, because like every other person's sport, like people would go to watch like the football games and like local baseball things. So like sports. The kids who were like good at those sports were like respected and like complimented for that. But you know, no one ever went to a dirt bike race. So like I would like win a race, and then I'd come back and like no one would know. And then that's where the class clown-isms would come out. But yeah, I always just felt like, these assholes.
How do you think music and dirt biking affected like your business career?
Yeah,
it definitely had influences, right? Like there's definitely things that probably came out of that.
I think I've said this before, but I never really dissected it deeply. I think so dirt biking is like just exhilarating. It was the only, like when I found dirt biking, it was the only thing that truly put me in the present moment. Because you can't not be in the present moment.
Right.
When you're jumping 100, I mean, you saw the one race you went to, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it's full mental and physical engagement. My average heart rate from last weekend when I rode, I'll look it up right now. Average heart rate from my moto last Saturday, pull it up right here, was my first moto was 143 beats a minute. My max heart rate was 180 on my first moto. Second was average of 155 and 180 max. But I spent the entire moto. Actually, the average is off because I started my heart rate tracking when I was still driving to the track. So and I had to wait for practice to start. But the entire race, I was in the red zone, the fifth cardio zone 5 for 20 minutes. Insane to do that. So like for me, like with that physical demand and mental demand, because you're jumping 100-foot jumps and you're at 170 BPM for the majority of the time, you can't think of anything else. And to me, like I fell in love with full immersion, and like when I was really confused in college, I wasn't there until I like burned the ships and said I'm going to get straight A's, and that gave me that same feeling of full immersion.
Right.
And then risk taking, obviously, like, you know, I broke about 19 or so bones before I was 18 years old. So a bone a year from age 1. Now, it wasn't like that. Like it's about 19 injuries, and I'm sorry, it's probably about like 8 or 9 legit like serious injuries. Like one of them I broke multiple ribs, so that's technically 3 bones, but that's one accident. But I guess what it taught me is like no injury. Whether this is right or wrong, it's like when I'm a kid, I'm impressionable, but like injuries don't kill you, and I feel like that's important in business. It's like
resilience.
Setbacks don't kill you, right? Yeah. Like my left arm is 4 inches shorter, or like 3 inches shorter than my right arm, right? Because it's probably about maybe 3. Like
we still never measured you for suits. Well, I'll have to. I'll actually get the measurement
because I broke my humerus here, the upper bone here, scapula, both wrists, both collarbones, vertebrae in my back, multiple ribs. And you just always come back, you know.
Yeah.
You know, now I'm a lot smarter with riding than I was then, but that's what dirt biking taught me, is kind of like risk taking and full immersion. And music taught me a little bit of like presenting, because I was like lead singer, so like I loved being on stage. Like I loved being the front man of the band. It just felt natural. It took years for me to really step into that and like enjoy that. But then after that, it really just became art. Like I like the ability to, not necessarily art, take that back. It's more like the ability to create something from nothing. Like a song doesn't exist, and then a song exists, and that like is...
That is art.
It's really cool to me. Yeah. Just it's more so creation.
Yeah.
And it's unfiltered creation, and it's personal and vulnerable creation. I think also music was the first time I opened up about my childhood struggles with anxiety. It's also the first time I opened up about my parents' divorce, like through lyrics and songs and stuff. And it taught me vulnerability, because I had a guy like tattoo on his chest, like lyrics of this song called One Roof that I made. And it was about like my parents, divorce, and like, seeing that is freaking crazy.
Yeah.
Like, someone permanently put a huge chest tattoo on them for a lyric that I wrote. Damn. And that was like one of the most vulnerable lyrics. So it taught me vulnerability, taught me creating things from nothing, taught me presenting. But at the moment, they all felt like just not necessarily distractions, but I gave up each of these things at phases of my life. Like fully gave up dirt biking, fully gave up music, and in the moment it felt like, shit, what the hell am I gonna do with my life? I struck out 2 for 2. Both of the first 2 things I loved and went all in on, I didn't make any money at, and didn't work. And so in the moment it was just like, this sucks. And then I remember when I first started doing the webinars at S&B team, I was like, holy shit, I found a way to like be the front man again.
Yeah.
And then like the first time I spent money on Google ads in the old office, I think it was the office that we were in right when you joined, that old office that got demolished. First time I spent $6,000 a month on Google ads, I was like, I processed it in my mind. I was like, is this as dangerous as a 150-foot triple? I don't think so, So pulled the trigger,
Yeah, minimizes everything else.
I feel like injuries aren't going to kill me,
Yeah.
But it's crazy how Steve Jobs said it best. You can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. And then once I started getting momentum, like same thing with okay, so like this is crazy, like sales. Like when I was class clown in high school, I thought that was because I was so unhappy during that period of my life. I had this one person Facebook message me once when I started kind of going through my rebirth as a human. I started putting out videos on success and like personal development. And for like a year, I put out like, the only videos I was putting out are videos that I wasn't really joking at all. I wasn't being that childish self. But if there were footage of me in the office throughout the typical day, like half of the day is a joke. Not half, but like maybe 10% of the day is like, I'm like extreme turned 100 on the dial of like joking and like pranks and stuff like that.
Yeah, you go hot and cold very much throughout the day.
And it's like all in on
extreme
it's like
intensity,
that full immersion,
focus,
or like
crazy,
poop jokes.
chaotic. Yeah, exactly.
So there's like no in between. Actually, it'd be really cool to find an in between for that. I don't know what it would be. Poop focus.
I don't know if you have that.
Yeah. But then like when I started going into sales, I didn't know I looked at my class clownness as like a character defect, because at the time I was so unhappy during that phase of my life, and my only way of coping was to entertain others. It wasn't from a place of authenticity or pureness. It was just like I wanted to take the attention off of me and get other people laughing.
Yeah.
Right? And people please others. And because that created so much pain for me, it required a form of a rebirth. So long story short, a year when I started posting content, it was my first year posting content. I had someone message me on Facebook, and they're like, man, it's so, like he messaged me and he said, like, it's so sad to see how you are now. You used to be so funny and like lighthearted. Now everything you talk about is like success, right? And I replied back to this person. I was just like, yeah, I looked happy to you because I wasn't happy with myself.
Right.
Like I was putting on a front. Like, this is me being happy. This is me being pure, is, committed to success and committed to being myself. These things can coexist, And then I remember when I got into sales at Yellow Pages, and there was a period where I posted like 100 videos in a year that I never really told anyone about, and most of the videos are deleted now. When I was at Yellow Pages, every day I drove to the office, I made videos in my car.
Oh, really?
I had one of those iPhone holders that were horizontal.
Yeah.
And it was like, it was pretty...
Do you still have these footage?
Yeah,
footage
it's somewhere.
anywhere?
It's probably archived in like my old Bill Hauser YouTube channel. There's like multiple Bill Hauser YouTube channels. It's like my first one.
Cal, we're going to have to dig that out.
Yeah. I mean, I was a know-it-all. I mean, like when I presented information, I was just a know-it-all, which wasn't cool at the time, but it was my way of just expressing my own learning.
Well, and you were what, 22?
Probably like 23, yeah.
Yeah.
But I always wondered, how am I going to use my, like, what this joker I had in me, like, how am I going to use that in sales? I never put two and two together. And then I had, like, one of my first sales calls in person, but most of my calls for the first few weeks were in person. Like, I was prospecting Manayunk. I was, I door knocked.
Just like door knocking.
Yeah, but most of it was cold calling, but I also door knocked. It was probably like 80-20, 80% calling.
Yeah.
Very quickly I learned how inefficient door knocking was, so I stopped doing it. But I had this meeting at the Starbucks in Manayunk. It's actually, no, not Manayunk, Roxborough.
Okay.
It's like that Starbucks that's on like the main street. There's a contractor, and I met with this person, and dude, my armpits are like literally dripping sweat. I am so scared, and yet I crushed it, right? And this person ended up signing up, and it was like a $1,500 a month deal, and the average deal size in the office was like, $600 a month,
oh, wow.
right? And I thought, I was driving back after this meeting. I was like, wait a second. I was so scared through this entire sales call. So scared. Visceral fear. But as I'm driving back, I'm like, what the hell just happened? How could I perform so well with such fear? And in my mind, as I'm like processing this, I'm like, wait, maybe I'm actually good at just like persuading people using a mix of logic and humor, right? Mm-hmm. And like authenticity. And I'm like, wait, that's kind of like what I was doing when I was in high school and middle school. Is like, and I didn't realize that like the ability to know when to be funny is actually like an emotional intelligence thing. It's not like a character defect. It's like the ability to, because when you're being entertaining and authentic, typically people's guard goes down, mm-hmm. right? So I would just be like, when I'd start calls, I would try to do something really unusual, whether in person or on phone. I'd try to do something unusual in the first like 5 minutes to show them that like I'm not a salesperson, I'm a human being.
Right.
Like, so
you do that in interviews too.
Yeah.
When we recruited people. Yeah.
It's like a weird thing that just came naturally to me. And for some reason, it caused people to just not label me as a salesperson. Like, I just came off very human, and like I was willing to say things that were right on the brink of things you shouldn't say to someone, but like just safe enough to where like they would laugh, Well,
you also highlighted, you said when you were reflecting, like how did I do that based on the fear I had going into it? But I think that's another thing that probably dirt biking and being on stage gave you, is the ability to deal with pressure, right, in the moment, which is like something you probably didn't think about.
And
but that's huge.
Desensitization too, because like pressure, it's not like, I hate when people call me fearless, because like there's way more fearless people than me. But I think behind someone that you would label as bold, you're going to see fear, mm-hmm. and acting in spite of the fear. If it wasn't scary, then it's not really bold.
Yeah.
Right?
True.
So like, it's actually, these are two very inverse things. Like, you can't be fearless and do bold things. Like, if you read Elon's biography, it is freaking amazing. Like, and I've made a lot of videos on it, but like that is one of the longest biographies I've ever seen. I mean, it's crazy how many pages it is. And I read it 2 times start to finish. And it's hard to read books start to finish anyways nowadays.
Yeah.
And when you see the moment where everything's about to go bankrupt, I forget the exact like story, but it's like SpaceX is about to go bankrupt, Tesla's about to go bankrupt, and something else all at the same time, right? And then he gets bailed out on a SpaceX contract, and at the same time gets the money that he needed for Tesla, and like had one thing not happen right, like everything would have gone bankrupt. So like people would call Elon fearless, right? For everything he's accomplished. I don't think he's fearless though. I think that he's been through so many emotionally taxing situations and such high stakes situations that he's now learned to trust himself that I can get through situations like this, even in spite of the fear. So then fear ends up becoming more of a trigger of something great's about to happen, right?
Yeah, I think fear, like, in my eyes, I would agree with you. I don't think anybody's fearless. I think fear triggers either the most, like, the best out of you, you know, or the weakest parts of you, like the strongest part of you or the weakest part of you. So I think the people that succeed and go through, they do it because they just have that much strength internally that they are able to fight through fear. But they're still feeling the fear.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, think about Navy SEALs. You could call them fearless, but you're telling me they don't have any fear going into raiding a house, not knowing where people are. It's pitch black in the middle of, like when they, caught some of these terrorists overseas, like they had to have been fearful. I mean, there's no way that you're not in that moment, about to shit your pants of what's about to happen.
Yeah.
But they fight through it and they overcome it because they have that internal strength. So I think you can have both at the same time.
And the mission exceeds the fear.
Yeah.
Like,
they rise to the occasion.
If you don't have a mission, right? If you don't know what you're doing or why you're doing it, then it's really hard to go through fear-based, scary, challenging situations. 'Cause why? Why would I go through this? It's easier to just keep doing what I'm doing. If there's no promised land I want to get to or no impact I want to create, then why would I suscept myself to a fear-based situation? So I think that's another thing is like the mission and the impulse to succeed, right? And if the mission and your impulse to succeed is if it's like a weight balance, and mission and impulse to succeed is heavier than fear, then you're going to take action despite the fear.
Yeah.
Without considering the fear. I mean, fear is a really interesting thing.
Well, I bet a lot of the people that say things like, "Oh, they're fearless," they probably live in a lot of fear, right? And they allow that to hold them back on doing things. So they just assume that people who are able to do this, they're just fearless people, and they just don't understand maybe the fortitude these people have to get through that fear. But everybody experiences that. It's a normal emotion.
That's why I think like understanding the emotion of fear and how it materializes in your own body is one of the most powerful self-learning tools anyone could ever learn. Like I wrote a book on this, Warrior 180. I spent 8 months of my life writing down everything I knew about how I overcame fear, because that technically anxiety they say fear, and this is why most people mislabel fear, but fear is a raise of cortisol and stress hormones in your body in relation to a real and present danger. Anxiety is typically fear applied to a future potential danger, right?
Okay, that makes sense.
It's like real and present,
right.
Lion is chasing me, right? So that's fear, right? Anxiety is, if I go to the zoo, will the lion chase me? Right? Like people, like if you were to get anxious about a potential future threat, right? That would be anxiety. And I just think most people don't know the difference between how, what is fear, what is anxiety, and then how does it materialize in your body? Like there's always going to be a physical and a mental materialization of stress hormones that get released. And by the way, that's all it is.
Yeah.
Fear is literally just your brain. First there's a stimuli. So you have to see, you have to think, or you have to hear, or you have to smell something. There has to be an input typically, right? So there's a stimuli, and then the stimuli causes your mind, we'll call it, which is a compilation of your body and brain, to react to that stimuli. And the react is typically, the reaction is a releasing of stress hormones, And the stress hormones create a physical and mental response, just like if you're running from a tiger, right? So if I have a anxiety-provoking thought and my body senses that as a stimuli, my heart rate is going to slightly increase. My neck is going to get a little tense. Well, everyone's different. Some people, their temples get tense. Other people, their neck gets tense. Other people, handshake. Their stomach kind of feels a little achy, right? But all that that's a physical, that's basically changing of blood in your system, because your blood rushes from your extremities to the core of your body when you're in a state of fear, right? And the psychological component of that is, oh crap, I'm feeling stressed, and then you become aware of the fact that you're feeling stressed, and then that amps up your negative thoughts about it, and that's what creates an anxiety loop, where you think something anxiety provoking, it creates a symptom in your body, and then the thoughts get more intense.
Yeah.
And then you're like, oh shit, the thoughts are more intense. And this actually happens with a lot of people with sleep, right? It's like,
what do you mean?
Like oh man, why can't I go to sleep tonight?
Ah.
That's a thought. And that thought is a stimuli. And that stimuli goes, it makes you anxious in the body. And then makes that thought that you originally had worse. Fuck, I really can't
That's
go
why
to
you
sleep.
can't fall back.
This is terrible, right?
Yeah.
But it's the complete opposite of, then it's like, how do I fix this? Well, I gotta drink herbal tea before I go to bed. I gotta unwind earlier. I gotta da 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 da. But what does that tell your body? Those are all stimuli. Mm-hmm. Your body goes, wait, whoa, why are you doing all this stuff? Is something wrong? Right? And it's the whole perception of a problem, right? That your mind will always be smarter than your body. The subconscious mind is going to pick up on everything the body does and everything you physically do. So if you're doing all these tips and tricks and trying to solve a problem, I just said the word problem. Your body is sensing generally there's a problem here. Why is all this new stuff happening so suddenly?
However,
right?
You could also train yourself to have mind control, which can help it too. Right? That's why a lot of people meditate. Mm-hmm. Slow things down. I mean, I think that's what they talk about with the snipers and going back to the military example.
Yeah.
They have to slow themselves down, breathing techniques, all these things to help take back control of those
100%.
things, like you said.
But as long as that's not perceived as a problem,
Right.
they should be perceived as enhancements,
right.
Sharpening your skills, making you smarter, faster, stronger, right? The problem is when you do those things from a place of, I have a problem, I need to fix the problem, that's all your body hears, right? And then people say, I tried everything, right? With whatever it is in their life. But the fact that you're trying everything is signaling to your body there's a problem. And it's also, to your point, you have to meditate. If you want to have more control over your mind, you have to learn how to be with your mind in silence, right? If you want to physically feel better, you have to exercise, right? There's minimum requirements, and those minimum requirements, like drinking herbal tea before bed, is a great technique for some people. Unwinding before bed and not watching emotionally provoking TV shows before you go to bed, probably a little better. It's going to wind you down a little bit. But all these things can be done loosey-goosey. I'm doing this because I want to become a better person. I'm not doing this because I have a problem, And for me, I spent years of my life in the state of there's a problem and I need to fix it, I need to meditate to overcome my problems. I need to,
I find sometimes I can trick myself, I trick my own mind by telling myself I'm doing this for this. This is what I need to do X. And it's almost like if I can repeat it over and over and over, eventually I trick my mind into believing what I'm saying. So it's not a negative response, or not I'm trying to solve a problem. It's no, I like to, the wind down period, like you mentioned. Like, hey, this is what I need at the end of my day so I can relax and get to bed. And then you just keep thinking that over and over and over. Then eventually your brain just like wired to now have that time, and it knows, okay, when that's done, I can now go to bed. And so it's interesting, but the mind's a powerful thing.
It's auto-suggestion.
Yeah.
Self-suggestion.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
It's like doing Pavlov on myself.
Yeah. I mean, that is there's a reason that's like one of the first chapters in Think and Grow Rich. It's like self-administered stimuli is what they talk about in Think and Grow Rich. Think about that. Self-administered stimuli. Okay, well, it makes sense. Self, I'm the one who administers it. I administer it, meaning I give myself a thought that supports my life, not detracts from my life. And stimuli, thought is stimuli, right? So like technically, either voluntarily or involuntarily, I believe every thought is self-administered. Either you let it happen, or because of your ignorance or lack of mindfulness, you're not aware it's happening, and therefore you're letting it happen. Right? The key is to be able to see your thoughts in real time and not be affected by them. And that's really hard.
Very.
Like,
but powerful, yeah.
Feeling this thought again. You know? And how many times do people have, like, irrational thoughts in their life?
A ton. I mean, there's what was I just watching? I was just watching something on this. I don't think it was anxiety. I'm trying to think back to what it was. But there was a doctor essentially talking about this with like stress and all these other things, and that was depression and whatnot. It was the same sort of thing, where it's like people just keep thinking these things over and over and over again, to the point like where you were mentioning, where it just builds up to be so much, and that a lot of depression is self-inflicted. And they were talking about, you don't necessarily need all these different drugs and all these other things if we could control our thoughts and mind better on what we think about. But most people that suffer from depression, there's a term for it, but I forget what it's called. And it's just from self-inflicted thoughts.
Here's my question. And I've just looked up how many thoughts we have per day. We have 6,000 to 60,000 thoughts per day.
6,000
to 60,000. That's the
gap.
range of
Okay.
number of thoughts. I know, crazy. I'm in the 60,000.
I'm definitely in the 60,000 as well.
But the chance of having a irrational thought, if you're having that many thoughts per day, it's just normal.
Yeah, 60,000.
I mean,
does it say a percentage or anything of what it could be, or no?
No, it said it gives me categories though. It says that there's catastrophizing, which is expecting the worst, all or nothing thinking, viewing situations in extremes, overgeneralization, drawing broad conclusions from a single event, mind reading, assuming you know what others are thinking, right? Okay, example, like there's minor irrational thoughts like, oh, this person didn't reply to my text, they must hate me.
Yeah.
Right? I have thoughts like that. Like, or, what if I rip this person's eyeballs out? I have that thought every day.
I was just thinking, what if we get to the point where AI we can read each other's thoughts? I don't know that I want to read your thoughts.
That's going to be normal.
I'd rather not know.
Yeah. What if I could just, steal this person's dog and, and do it in front of his whole family? These are normal things, right? Right?
It's the thoughts I have on the way in with traffic. Yeah, I mean, it's the thoughts that go through my head.
Yeah,
I would not want out there. Yeah.
No, it's interesting because people tend to hide these things, and comics literally make their entire livelihood by naming and talking about the thoughts that nobody else
is
talks
willing
about.
to say. Yeah.
I mean,
everyone thinks them.
And cancel culture has literally, I believe, has been built on the expression of irrational thoughts.
For sure.
Right?
Which I think that's reversing now. I think people are just finally realizing this is what we all think.
Yeah.
And it's okay to just call it out and realize we're all normal.
Yeah.
I think it's worse if you. I think like the whole cancel culture around these types of thoughts is a bad thing because it's then signaling to people like you're not normal if you think these. Like
Yeah.
there's something wrong with you. And it's like sometimes you can't control the thoughts that come into your head. It's how you react to that thought.
Yeah.
Right? Am I able to put that thought aside? Am I able to squash that thought
This is
and
like
train myself to go to a different thought?
If you were to measure someone's life on their actions, not their thoughts, not hypotheses,
Right.
not things they said while joking, right? The world would be a much happier place if
Yeah.
we just said, oh, let's see what this person actually did up to this point in their life. That's going to be all the evidence because you don't take action on every single thought you have.
No.
Right? I mean, if you did, you'd have to take 60,000 actions a day,
Yeah, it'd be
which would be
insane.
impossible, right? So there's, and I just think that the art of thinking is also another very difficult skill. I mean, how
art
does
of
one
thinking.
get really good at thinking? Like Elon's a great example. Bring him up again. Like some people use first principle thinking, right? That's where Elon gravitates. Is he'll condense a problem all the way down to the most fundamental physics-based truth, right? First principle, something he knows is true.
Okay.
And then he'll found his decision-making and thought processes from a place of truth, right? Which is why, he's a lot of the changes that I think he's trying to make with X is around that. Like he wants
His fundamental truth is just about free speech.
He wants it to be free speech, but he also wants there to be an ability to cite what people say. And I believe there's a new feature on X where you can do that, where you can actually see a citation of like where this thing came from.
Meaning if it was like just a clip of it,
Yeah,
you'd
if
be
it
able
was
to
just a
then see
clip,
the whole
you'd see
thing
the
or something.
deep citation. I forget
Interesting.
what it's called, but
That's a great idea.
I mean, it's just how many people are actually logical in their thinking?
I don't know. I remember when I got certified in Culture Index, they had that emotional scale, which I really enjoyed, which is like do you think more emotionally or more logically? Most people, if I remember correctly from all the results I saw, like tended to be in the middle or towards emotional, just slightly.
Yep.
I don't think there was as many on the logic. That could just be the type of people we were interviewing or whatever else for the type of industries, but who gravitates to those. Because certainly certain roles, people tend to be more logical, et cetera. So that could have had an influence. So it's not a good sample necessarily.
So this is interesting. It says if somebody has 50,000 thoughts per day, the number of irrational thoughts would depend on various factors. If we assume, I asked it to guess, the average individual, we would assume between 10 and 20% of their thoughts are irrational.
10 to 20, yeah.
That's pretty
yeah.
crazy. So think about that. 1 in 10 to 1 in 5 thoughts are not rooted in rational thinking.
Yeah.
So then I asked, what percent of thinking is logical versus emotional? 70 to 80% is what?
I would think emotional.
Yeah.
Yeah.
70 to 80% is emotional and 20 to 30% is logical. So, what does that say? Like, perhaps because most people don't embrace as much logical thinking as they do emotional thinking, having control over your emotions is the key to logical thinking.
For sure.
Because if you just allow yourself to think, emotional thinking is like, all the times you've come into the office and said, this guy cut me off in traffic and I'm going to stab him. I mean, if I had $1 for every time, I'd be a billionaire. And a couple times you did, but you didn't really hurt the guy. But how many times do you have you ever seen Billions? You watch Billions.
Oh, I love that show. Yeah,
it's freaking amazing. And even Axe, in Billions, you could see how many emotional decisions he makes. Like competitive, I just want to take this dude's lights out type decisions, and puts himself in harm's way in the end because of all these constant emotional decisions.
Well, and that's much more reactionary too, right? So that's the danger of it. Mm-hmm. And I bet you, I don't know if this is a study or this is just like ChatGPT giving us a stat, but I would venture to guess if you took the study from before social media existed to today, the amount of emotional thoughts as a percentage has probably increased. It's only going to get worse because everything we do is reactionary and emotional to what we're seeing on social media, and it's kind of designed to elicit that or solicit that emotion, right? So,
well, think about the election, right?
Yeah, I mean, people go crazy.
How do people make decisions during an election? Sound bites.
Yeah.
Oh, I saw
Triggers
this one
emotion.
clip of blah, or this person stands for blah. How do you know that? Did you watch the entire speech of every clip that you looked at, or did you just hear a soundbite from a biased party?
It's even how news works now, right? Like news used to be about more in-depth, whatever, and everything now is about the headline. If you look at any news stations like app or anything, it's the headlines. And what I noticed too is if you look at it throughout the day, the headline will change 2 to 3 times. Because they're doing A/B testing on what's going to trigger the biggest response. And what viral. Is it? It's emotion. What makes you click on that is mostly emotion. Is why you see this headline, you're like, oh, if it triggers more logic thinking, like, oh, that makes sense, it's probably not going to have as big of an impact. But if it triggers emotion, they're going to click it.
So check this out. I typed in how does social media influence, how does it influence emotional thinking and irrational thinking, right? Okay. Number one, it says amplification of emotional thinking. Emotional content drives engagement. It's the first point here. Social media algorithms prioritize content that elicits strong emotional responses: outrage, joy, fear, sadness. This is more likely to be shared and seen. Echo chambers. Social media often connects users with like-minded individuals or content, reinforcing existing emotional beliefs and biases. Discouraging exposure to differing perspectives. Fear of missing out. Constant exposure to curated highlights of others' lives fosters anxiety, jealousy, insecurity. Dopamine hits. Likes, comments, shares create dopamine-driven rewards and reinforce emotionally charged behavior. So emotion. Irrational. Cognitive overload. This is interesting. One reason that social media promotes irrational thinking is the sheer volume of information on social media overwhelms critical thinking.
That makes sense.
Users may rely on heuristics, mental shortcuts to process information, leading to snap judgments and irrational conclusions. Confirmation bias. Since social media serves tailored content that aligns with the user's existing beliefs, reinforcing irrational ideas and cognitive distortions. Then misinformation, disinformation. Rapid spread of false or misleading information thrives on emotional appeal, which leads to people forming irrational opinions. Very interesting.
Well, yeah, see, it makes sense. Like, if the reason it feeds you things that tie into your own beliefs is because you probably feel better emotions when you click on something and it reinforces your thoughts or beliefs that you're already having.
Yeah.
So if you click on one and then you see another article that reinforces that one before, you're going to click on that and it's going to make you feel better a little bit. Even though it's maybe a strong emotion, it's maybe not healthy to think this way. It's maybe making you feel a little bit better from a dopamine standpoint of like, I knew I was right. I knew this is what it was. But if you click on something else, then it completely sends you in the opposite direction. So it's just going to keep reinforcing your thoughts, which just perpetuates this divide that we have in the country, which is not good.
Yeah, it's kind of like the Nick Sirianni stuff, right? So Nick Sirianni leading the Eagles. Right now they're 8-2.
After last night.
Yeah, they're freaking crushing it right now. And when they were 2-2 at the beginning of the season and had one game that they won, and they went for it on like fourth once and did a 2-point conversion on the 1 yard line 2 times, which they have like a 96% with the tush push likelihood of making it. And everyone just freaks out. Oh my God, fire Nick Sirianni. Meanwhile, we're like, right now we're number 2 in the entire NFC. And through this whole process of like hearing the Philadelphia fans freak out, which sports is a great outlet for emotional thinking,
For sure,
irrational emotional thinking. If you logically think about how challenging the sport of football is, there's always luck, right? So to win a football game and have the reality of luck means you really won a football game, because both teams have luck as a variable.
Sure.
Right? In every game. And if you look at any play, you know, a fumble happens and it gets recovered by the team that fumbled it. That could have changed the whole game around if the other team got that fumble.
And that could all just be on the way the ball bounced. Last
Yeah.
night, that fumble that Philadelphia recovered,
Yeah,
the
you
guy
saw
punched
that.
it out.
Dallas got it.
If it had bounced forward, Washington would have probably had that ball. It could have changed the momentum of the game.
And if that guy, the guy who got the ball, ran 1 foot differently, then someone else would have got that ball.
Yeah.
And the whole game would have changed, right? But if you look at logically, like if you were to logically diagnose every sports game, it's going to be very clear like who the best sports team is just based on pure logic, right?
Yeah.
But the only thing that people remember is the way the game made them feel. If they felt anxiety for the whole game and we're behind and da-da-da-da, right? We missed 2 field goals and an extra point last
An extra
night.
point, yeah.
We would have won. We would have won by a lot. We would have won like 30. It would have been 36-16 had we got those points, or 34.
Something like that, yeah.
34 or 35. People don't remember that. All they see is, oh, we're behind.
Yeah.
Like, so it's just like, and I feel like this in business is like one of the most important tools is non-emotional thinking. Is okay, I want to do this. I want to, go into a new business or buy a company or spend more money on marketing or hiring, and how much of that impulse is emotional,
Well, I don't know that it's – I would argue it's not necessarily that success is determined on non-emotional thinking, but non-emotional decision-making.
That's good.
You're going to have the emotional thinking regardless.
It's what you take
Some of
action
it
on.
could be good or bad, yeah.
Great
Can you exercise control of your thoughts and then make non-emotional decisions?
So make the pyramid principle apply to any person. Imagine you're teaching the pyramid principle to a college student, because that's something that you've gotten really good at. Because that is would you agree, a method of logical thinking?
100%. And I was actually going to bring that up when you mentioned like the art of thinking. I was going to say like it's kind of incredible how you can train your brain to think in different ways. I've never thought in a pyramid principle way, which is taking the situation, potentially a complication, then you have a question of like, okay, if it's, we need to hit a certain goal by the end of this year. The complication is, we only have 2 marketing channels. So the question is like, do we explore other marketing channels? Do we double down on our, whatever? And then you have to have a hypothesis. And then the pyramid principle from there, you determine what your hypothesis is and you try to prove it through 3 to 5 supporting points, which all have supporting facts underneath it. So that's, for anyone who doesn't know what pyramid principle is, just a way to make decisions within your business. And I've practiced it so much now that it's kind of second nature. Like I think and speak in pyramid principle ways. I don't know if you've noticed it, but I know like other people have mentioned it where I practice it day in, day out for so many weeks and months that it's now how I think. And it's a very logical way, which is great because if I have any bias of emotion in any of my thoughts, a lot of times you'll hear people speak in hyperbole. That's a great sign that it's probably an emotional thought or response, right? We see it all the time. We always tell people like, was it one client that feels that way, or is it 50 clients that feel that way?
Yeah.
Because they'll say, well, everyone wants to do this. Well, how many people? Is it really 1 or 2?
Yeah.
Or is it 50? That's a big difference. And then like, I guess it was just 1 or 2.
Do you realize how many decisions we used to make on just emotion like that? Oh, one client complained about blah.
Exactly.
Change
That's an emotional
everything.
reaction. But that's when you take the pyramid principle and you start to think logically. You start to say, okay, well, let's look for those support. Because you have to have the reasons with supporting facts underneath them.
Yeah.
And that's when we would get down to the point where it's like, okay, well, I need to see how many clients.
Yeah.
And then you realize, okay, this hypothesis doesn't make any sense. We shouldn't do this because there's not enough evidence here to support it.
Yeah.
It forces you into logical thinking.
So the pyramid principle is a communication framework developed by Barbara Minto while working at McKinsey and Company, which is one of the largest management consulting companies in the world. It's designed to structure ideas logically and present them clearly and effectively. The principle organizes information in a hierarchical, I never could pronounce that
Hierarchical?
word. Hierarchical, pyramid-like structure, starting with the main idea at the top, breaking it down into supporting arguments and evidence. So, top of the pyramid, start with the answer. Example, we should launch a new product in Q2 to capitalize on market trends and boost revenue. Group supporting arguments. This is the middle layer. So then we would go divide that main idea into a small number, 2 or 4 key points, and arguments that support it. These points should be mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive. So each point is distinct, and together the points cover all related aspects of the argument. So we should launch a new product. Right, the reasons, right? Key points. We should launch a new product because the last time we launched a new product, this happened.
Mm-hmm.
And we should launch a new product because our clients have been asking for blah as a service, right? And then you just list out all these supporting things, and then under that we provide supporting evidence. So great. How do we know our clients actually want this? That would be like what you said, like how many
Right.
clients want this? Where did we hear from them that they wanted this? Did they just say it in passing, or did they say it like sitting down with us in a very designated way that they want X?
Or do we do a survey where they actually have
a survey?
50% of our clients are looking for this?
And then from that, you're able to kind of debunk, because I actually like this because it actually starts with more of like the emotional. Like, we should do blah. And then it's like, okay, give me 4 reasons we should do blah, and then show me 4 pieces of evidence for each of those 4 reasons that we should do blah.
Yeah, that was my point. It forces you into logic. So it's okay if you start with that hypothesis of what you should do, because by the end of it, you'll either prove or disprove that thought, whether or not it was logical or emotional. It doesn't matter, because you'll either prove it or disprove it. And then you can start over, right? So there are times where the reason I got really good at it was I was working with our executive coach, and then he's the one that taught me this, and we'd work through them, and he honed my skills on it. But then what I would do is I would take all sorts of situations throughout the week and just pyramid principle everything. And where you get good at it is sometimes your first hypothesis is wrong. You just prove it through that. You can't come up with enough supporting facts or evidence of those, or the reasons or the evidence and facts of those reasons. And so then you go back and try a different hypothesis for the same situation you're dealing with, the same problem or challenge. And then you do a new hypothesis, and it's like, can I prove it this way? And then maybe you try a third one, and and eventually you start again to be able to kind of do it real time in your head, so that your hypothesis becomes more accurate the first
Over time.
Yeah.
If you use this example, I think this is like one of the keys to fundamentally clean thinking, right?
I've been working with our team on a lot of the managers on this type of thought process.
Yeah, it's like the key, because if evidence doesn't support the thought, then it's a guess.
Yeah.
Right. And what's interesting is we talked about fear earlier, and I'm reflecting. I believe logical thinking is what actually allowed me to overcome fear.
Mm-hmm.
Is like I feel an emotion towards something, like fear. And once I educated myself on what fear actually is, I go, oh, wow, it's really interesting that my body is releasing these stress hormones and creating this perception as though I'm very stressed right now. Right? So like, and then my mind, when I would impose a factual thought like that on the back of an emotion like fear, my body would go, whoa, wait. Maybe this fear isn't that bad. And then I would be able to trick myself into not being fearful, because it's just stress hormones, no biggie. Like your body releases hormones all day. It's just another hormone that got released.
And the other 2 things that people should take in mind, I mean, Bezos talked about he never makes more than, one or two really big decisions every day, right?
Yeah.
So I think the longer you go in the day, the more fatigued you become, the more likely you are to be susceptible to emotional
Yep.
decision making, reacting on emotional thoughts versus logical thoughts, because I think logic takes more energy to go through. So that's a good tip. The other one is, if you think about it, people always talk about if you have a really big decision to make, okay, we're going to launch this new product line. It's going to be a big overhaul. We went through the pyramid principle and we still believe this is a good thought. You could also just come back the next day. Because if there is any emotion still tied to it, you might have a completely different emotional state the next day.
Yeah.
And it kind of removes that. And if it's like, oh, it's consistent, I still feel this way, then, that makes sense. It's probably true.
Imagine if people chose their jobs like this. Imagine if, like, the world was enforced to, like, I wonder what industry is growing fast. I wonder what my gifts are. What are things I'm unusually talented at?
And what you enjoy.
What are things that I stop time when I do it and I enjoy so much and did it? I wonder what potential paths would work best for me with these three considerations, right?
That'd be a great, algorithmic calculator you could do to
What
you could run a funnel on
companies
that.
what companies are the best for me to
Yeah.
employ these three skills? And but how do people do it? Oh, I got a job here, I'm just gonna suck it up. And then fast forward 5 years go by and, oh shit.
They're unhappy, they haven't accomplished what they wanted.
And just think
Full of
about this.
regret.
You spend the majority of your life working, right?
Yep.
I mean, or close to it for most people. So, wow. If we're not using logic to decide where we spend the majority of our time, imagine if everyone used logic to pick their spouse. And I have seen some people who have done that, who have created
Oh, I'm sure there are plenty.
hierarchy. Usually it's people later in their life who've gotten a divorce and went through
What are they
ton of
actually looking
turmoil.
for now?
Right? And they're like, what is this? How much do I want? Is this important to me? What about this? And it definitely takes a little bit out of the spontaneity of life. You don't want everything to be perfectly logically decided on, because then there's no spontaneousness. And by the way, spontaneousness accelerates learning. If you don't put yourself in the new situations that are unplanned, you're not going to learn as much. You have to put yourself in uncomfortable, illogical situations to learn about yourself. That's why I think COVID was a really defining moment for a lot of entrepreneurs, and it was also a crumbling moment for a lot of entrepreneurs, and just went and got jobs because they couldn't figure it out.
Well, and understanding where you fall on that spectrum of emotional versus logic, and you don't have to take an assessment to do it. I mean, you can just kind of start trying to self-assess throughout the day of how many of my thoughts were seemingly emotional today versus logical. And try to, like you said, put yourself in that situation of the opposite, right? Because there are people who are very, very logical, and they probably lead, fairly successful lives. They've got, they're very diligent on their investments. They probably have good retirements, but they also kind of have a very boring life.
Yeah.
Never experience new things, and never put themselves out there to be vulnerable in any situation. So I think it's good to kind of challenge yourself. And so if you're very logical, put yourself in a situation where logic is completely removed from that equation.
Yeah.
And vice versa. If you're always emotional, try to practice some of these ways of thinking that produce more logical thoughts.
I think there's certain situations where logic is close to non-negotiable. Example would be buying a company. Making a multi-million dollar decision to buy a company. You can't just say, oh, I talked to the person and I fell in love at first sight. You know?
That's dangerous.
You're making a crazy financial investment in a company, and there's other things where logic is probably a little less important. And I think there's knowing when to use logic is really important. I looked up first principles thinking because this is a foundational approach for people like Elon and Bezos, and so it's a problem-solving approach. First principles thinking is a problem-solving approach that involves breaking down complex issues into their most basic, fundamental truths, and then reasoning up from there. Instead of relying, so it seems like the inverse of the pyramid principle.
That's what I was thinking, yeah.
Instead of relying on assumptions, analogies, or traditional methods, It focuses on understanding the core elements of a problem to develop innovative and effective solutions. This method is often associated with thinkers like Aristotle, who discussed reasoning from first causes, and modern innovators like Elon Musk, who frequently advocates for its use. How first principle thinking works. 1. Identify and challenge assumptions. 2. Break down the problem into fundamental truths. And 3. Reason up from first principles. Example, identify and challenge assumptions. Instead of assuming batteries are expensive, ask why they are expensive. Why are batteries expensive? Break down the problem into fundamental truths. Example, a battery is made of raw materials like lithium, nickel, and aluminum, which costs a certain amount per kilogram. Reason up from first principles. Example, explore how you can make batteries cheaper by finding alternative materials, improving manufacturing efficiency, or redesigning the product.
Interesting. Okay, so it is kind of the reverse, but it also does somewhat the same.
Yeah, like how can I decrease the cost of batteries is like the opening question. Or decreasing the cost of batteries will revolutionize Tesla.
Yeah, it's all, so okay, so
Would be like the opening question.
maybe it's almost like that's a great principle for creating and inventing,
Okay.
whereas pyramid principle is a great challenge, like problem-solving type method. And the reason I say that is because when you do pyramid principle, our coach always taught me, try to take the situation, like what you're looking at, to the highest level, right? So, if you're having, let's say in your business you have some managers who aren't doing well, and you're seeing issues with them, people are complaining about them. You could say, well, we have a manager problem, or you could say we have a training problem. But if you keep thinking, well, is it really training? Is it really management? Maybe it's a culture problem in your organization. That could be the highest level thing you have to solve, right? So you take it up to the highest, biggest thing you can. Whereas it's the same thing there. They're just doing it in the reverse order. So you know what I mean? Because in that situation, you could say, if I took it in the pyramid principle, we would say we have an issue with affordable resources in the world, which are causing all of these other things as an effect, right? So I think the way he thinks about that is great for inventing new solutions to things. And pyramid principle is better problem solving.
Yeah, I think both
But you could
are
come to the same
powerful.
conclusion, yeah, because that's essentially what he's determining that these things are too expensive. The biggest situation of that is that these resources that produce these batteries and everything else are too expensive. How can we get this in a more efficient, cost-effective way?
Freaking crazy, man.
Which I guess you could also do with pyramid principle, but
What's interesting is because logical thinking had such a impact on my life. The Myers-Briggs personality type. I was for years of my life. I don't know if I ever told you this. I was an ENFJ.
I'm not as familiar with Myers-Briggs. I've taken it, but I don't remember it.
E is extroverted.
Okay.
N is intuitive. F is feeling, meaning I make my decisions primarily from a place of feeling. And then J is judgment, right?
Okay. Let's see if I can find my results.
I was an ENFJ for years of my life. And those years of my life were the least happy years of my life. Now, supposedly, you're not able to change your personality. But because I went through such an evolution when I was overcoming my anxiety, I literally changed my personality from an ENFJ to an ENTJ. And what that basically means, I went from an ENF to an ENT, right? Which means I went from my default was making decisions on feelings. And I changed my personality to making decisions on thinking and logic.
Interesting.
And it was interesting because when I got to the beginning of college, I always tested an ENFJ for 4 years. My last year of college, when I'd started overcoming my struggles with anxiety, I was a T. I was just so weirded out by this. It was a different personality type.
Yeah.
And ENFJ, so
I can't find mine.
What
so I don't know where I put them.
do they call the ENFJ personality? I think they call it something like the the protagonist, right? The protagonist, right? And that makes perfect sense. So makes decisions. The ENF in the F in ENFJ makes decisions based on values, empathy, and concern for others' feelings. People pleaser.
Yep.
Which is how I labeled that. There's ENFJs. I actually believe I was naturally an ENTJ, but I was pretending to be an ENFJ. And that's why it felt so unnatural to me to try and be people pleasing. Now, they call that the protagonist. Okay. Now, let's see what they call the ENTJ, and you're going to see why this is true, what I am now. What is the ENTJ personality type called? The commander.
Yeah, makes a lot more sense.
Right? So commander is, so ENTJs are known for their natural leadership qualities, strategic thinking, and drive to organize people and resources to achieve ambitious goals. ENFJ is characterized as charismatic, empathetic, and inspirational individuals who thrive on helping others and fostering meaningful connections.
Yeah, much more the commander.
Of a commander than that. Yeah. But it's interesting that, like, I take back what I said. I don't think I changed my personality. I think I was not being myself. When I was being an ENFJ, I think I was answering questions on the personality quiz based on what I actually did.
Yeah.
Do you care about what others think you? And I forget the questions, but I probably said yeah.
I'm sure, yeah.
And then probably towards the end of college, I was just like, no, and like started changing those answers. But I took the quiz like 15 times after that because I thought it was wrong. Because I thought you can't change your personality. And I was just like, oh my God, this is like, I'm a different person, literally.
Well, I know they say like in the behavioral ones, like, yeah, it's pretty much inherent because it's nature and nurture. So it's pretty much formed by the time you're 12, 13.
Yeah.
But they do often say that like a catastrophic life event are the circumstances where it could potentially alter the results.
Definitely happens.
So what you went through, it makes sense that it, it could have a skewed result.
Crazy. Well, that's all we got today. Bill Hauser Podcast. We out. And if you want to listen to my screamo bands again, then I don't think you should because it's kind of crazy.
It's going to cause a lot of emotion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Too much emotional thinking. See ya.